Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spaniola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numinous Podcast, where we have interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mystery of life. I'm your host, Carmen Spaniola, joining you from the lands of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations, recently known as Victoria, BC, Canada. Speaking of the mysteries of life, it's been a little wild around here. So next April 2024, I'll have been podcasting for 10 years. Back in the day, you'd publish on iTunes and they had this like top 10 downloads list. And it was a huge deal for me the day that my show was in like the top 3 shows that day. It was sandwiched between Oprah's New at the Time podcast, which was number 1. And then the Numinous Podcast, mine. And then it was like Eckhart Tolle had like a New Earth podcast or something. And after that was like Marianne Williamson. And I think there was one with like Pastor Rob Bell and Elizabeth Gilbert or something like that. That was a huge deal 10 years ago. Then 8 years ago, I went to see my next guest when she brought her live stage show. She was on like a speaking tour. I think she had a new book and a new deck out. She brought her live stage show to town. It was this like big sold out affair at the convention center. She did live mediumship readings for the audience, and she also pulled oracle cards for us. And in the transitions, she would like sing and banter with the audience. She has like a real homey showmanship. She's kind of got a bit of that like Dolly Parton style of humble sparkle. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just a down-to-earth girl making my way in the world with a big heart and a big smile. But like, meanwhile, the place is sold out. It's packed. You know, and she's on tour. Like, you've got to have quite a large fan base and quite a thriving business to pull that off. So, of course, by 2015, she'd already been doing this for a couple of decades. So I can tell you that in truth, I know my little show is hitting the big time when my next guest team is reaching out asking me if I would interview the illustrious Colette Baron-Reid on the Numinous Podcast. What an honor. What a full circle moment. What a wild ride. Colette Baron-Reid is widely known and well respected as an author and a thought leader in the personal transformation space. She has published 7 books and 17 best-selling oracle decks with millions of copies sold worldwide in 27 languages. I know some of you OG, some of you like first season Numinous Podcast listeners, you may remember that the artist of many of Colette's decks, Jenna Della Gratellia, she was one of my first guests on the show, episode 16. And I know many of my students over the years have loved the combination of Jenna's art with Colette's art direction and words. The deck I would personally consider Colette's most iconic deck, sort of the most classic, is the Enchanted Map. It was first published in 2011. It's been my everyday pull since then. Like, I think I got it in 2011 or 2012. It's also the deck that I've used to teach intuition and oracle reading, starting with workshops back in 2013. So that's just one of the ways that Colette's work has directly informed and deeply touched my life. So you can only imagine how elated I am that I got to spend some time one-on-one and reconnect with Colette for this episode. Yes, I say reconnect because actually it wasn't the first time we've met. So Colette, let's set the stage here. I know most of my listeners probably know who you are, but just in case they don't, what identities do you lead with?
Oh, you mean like he, she, her, that kind of stuff? No,
Yeah,
I mean
that and everything else.
Yeah,
yes,
and everything
that
else.
and everything else.
I consider myself a she. You know, what identities that no one's ever asked me that do I lead with? So I kind of never think about that unless somebody, I mean, what I do, I'm an intuitive. I've made a living for the past 35 and a half years doing this work. full time. So I'm a 35-year overnight success. Most people know me for my Oracle cards. They're sold all over the world in 29 countries. There was over 2 million out there now. But I'm an artist. So that's really what I'm kind of, so I have many identities, if you will, but mostly I'm just me, and see what happens next.
Well, that is how.
And I love dogs.
Yes, I can hear them, and I see them sometimes on Instagram. They're welcome. I have been using your Enchanted Map deck to teach about intuition development. That was the deck that I really felt helped people develop their own intuition. And one of the first guests on the podcast was Jenna Della Grottalia, because
oh my God, Jenna. Sure,
great collaborator.
She's doing her own decks. I hired her as an artist. So I met her. She was, I think, a makeup artist and doing some things on Deviant Art. And so I hired her. So, and then I kept hiring her for my decks. You know, that was really cool, because Hay House was like, no, we want you to do different art. I said, no, there's something about this girl. So she's had her, you know, her art all over the world now. And we're very close friends. We became friends, and I decided to go into a different direction, and I'm doing my own art next year. But, you know, it was time for her to spread her wings too. So she's now off doing her own stuff, which is great. I just talked to her yesterday. I think it was a karma. I drove her nuts as art directing her, though, like, this, not that. No, take that out. Put this in. Boom, boom, boom. But we had a incredible dance together. Yeah, we really did. So I'm super proud of her.
It's a very fruitful collaboration. It's put out a lot of really good work. And when I first met you, it was 2015. You'd come to Victoria, and you do live shows where you do all kinds of things. And you do spot readings for people. And at the end, people get books signed. So I brought my deck. And when I got up to you, I said, would you draw a card? And even before you drew the card, you looked at me and you said, you do what I do. And I sort of was bashful. I was like, oh my gosh. But I will say, I felt very seen. I'd never felt very seen for my intuitive presence or gifts. Yeah, I feel like I feel teary thinking about it. I felt very seen. And you said, you are going to be so successful. It's really stuck with me. So thank you for seeing me.
Oh my God, you're going to make me sob.
But at the time, I thought it's going to happen soon, right? Because I'd been doing it for 6 years by then. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the sign that I should like really pursue this. I should like really be more public. And I have been, but I will say, Colette, it's been like 8 years now. And the success is kind of, it feels like it's only just coming, even though I've been doing this since 2009. So it was like a longer time horizon than I expected.
I think this is what people get really screwed up about, is the idea that they're going to become famous or something. You know, success has cut a lot of different, you want to be successful for the long haul. You know, I've done readings full time since 1989,
Wow.
I think, no, 1988.
Wow.
1988.
Wow.
So think about that. How many years is that? Right? That's a long time.
Yeah.
And I consider success being able to do what you love and put food on the table and be really proud of what you do, and know that you're helping people, and know that you have a lifestyle that you enjoy. Right. And so really successful, you'll have a very successful podcast. It's like, what is success? Is it me? And again, I'm not suggesting you want to be famous, but I think sometimes in this profession, people come at it like, you know, why am I not more successful and famous? The word is the kind of undercurrent is like, why am I not famous? And that's not something to chase ever. Like, it's never something I ever wanted. I wanted to be a singer-songwriter anyway, so I didn't really put much effort into promoting this work for myself at all. So it's a kind of interesting, man plans and God laughs. I put all that effort into that, and that didn't, I mean, it happened, but it wasn't really the right path. You know, service has to come first, and patience is so important. I mean, I think we've gotten really confused with this whole manifesting movement, that we are in control of timing by our desire. And we look at other people. Why are they more ahead than I am? Because the comparison trap is so horrifying, considering and social media has really fostered that, right? And we can get really messed up by that. Like, oh, she said I was going to be really successful, but she didn't tell me when it was, right? And I just feel it about certain people. I see them, and I definitely don't say that to everybody in a lineup. But and I do think that we have to understand that long-term success is something that evolves. That's how you become an expert, is by putting the time in. People want to call themselves experts when they haven't put the 10,000 hours in that you have, right? I mean, you do this, like, you're for real. So how that expertise is presented to the public, how people vibe with you or not, is out of our control. It's completely out of our control.
So you
Go
are
ahead.
one of these rare people who has had a very long and successful career doing your intuitive arts in
Correct.
public for a long time. Not many
Yeah.
people can say that. So you've also seen the business
Seen it all, honey.
publishing and promotion, the advent of social media on the spiritual genre, particularly with publishing.
Yeah.
How has that changed
Oh my God,
over
too
your
bad.
career?
Oh gosh, because it has changed just in general, right? Like everybody does a deck now. Like, it's just that the market is saturated. It's like it's a red ocean now, right? I do what I love, right? And I take a lot of risks. And my husband has run my business up until now for the past 10 years. And like we invest in our work, we invest in the work. And I don't do just one thing. So, I was doing business consulting for a while and found myself really enjoying that. And so I kind of take the pulse of the fan base I have or whatever. And I realized, what, I'm going to offer the Spirit of Your Business course now, which is next week in October. So I have that, and I have Oracle Palooza, which is a big interactive event. And then I have Oracle School and my membership site, and I teach other courses, and I show up at events. I work my ass off. Okay, so, but I feel like I'm just starting. So for me, in terms of like the change in my career happened for me when I started painting, which is not about the career. It's when I stopped staring at the career. Like I'm a worker person. I like to work. I enjoy it. I'm a 10th house chart, so it's like, it's all about business. I really enjoy business, and I really love people. And I really feel like I got a second chance at life. I was a drug addict and an alcoholic. I'm really lucky to be alive. So I really feel I got the second chance. And yeah, the industry changes and you have to change with it. But you can't just define yourself by your work. And so when I started painting, I'm an empath, so I was having a really rough time. I was doing so much work that was unearthing a lot of stuff, working with anti-racism, diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism. I'm looking at some of my old wounds too, like, where am I still behaving in certain ways? I went into EMDR, I went back into therapy. I was like, I'm like, I need to be the person I can be proud of and educate myself on things I don't know. So of course that can stir up a lot of stuff. And I used to paint professionally 36 years ago, just for an interim year when I was pursuing career as a musician. I just painted on people's clothes for about a year, and I made a good living, like back in the 80s, right? And I hadn't picked up a paintbrush since then. So I needed a meditation outlet. So doing something that was not directly related to my career, even though it actually became a new deck that's coming out next year, which was never my plan, but it enabled me to remember that I'm not here to hustle. I'm not here to hustle my worth. I'm not here to compete with other people. I'm doing my own thing. I got my blinders on. I love what I do. I get to do it. It's really great. I don't need to be number one at anything. I was a lot more ambitious when I was younger, but now it's like, okay, who am I supposed to serve? And go do that. I spend less time looking at what's new, what's trending. I hate that. I don't care about that. At first, the whole trauma conversation became very like, okay, why is everybody using that word? Because no one really defined it accurately, and it's been very misused. But then I started to take a look at the collective trauma, and I started studying with Thomas Hubel and Gabor Mate. So my work is more informed now by what I am doing myself and what I am studying myself to recognize, given that I have groups and communities and people, how I meant to show up better as an informed leader. Because our world used to be fringe. Like when I started, what I did was I had a chip on my shoulder. I didn't want to tell people what I did because it was like, oh, that, now it's like, oh,
totally.
that's so cool. It's cool now. When I started, it was not cool.
No, there was a lot of social scorn. Even
Exactly.
in 2009, there's a tremendous amount of social scorn associated with intuition. And it took quite a bit to be able to lead with this identity, right? I'm an
Yeah.
intuitive, I do this. And now it's kind of like, oh yeah, you and everybody else kind of thing.
You know, it's
So
so funny when you said, what identity do you lead with? And I'm like, I don't even think about that. Like, what identity do I lead with? Like, because I've never, like, if somebody doesn't know what I do, this is the other thing.
yeah,
I don't tell them. It's just not important to me. It's like,
right.
it just isn't. So I'm like, I'm going to actually have some fun after we hang up today thinking about my identity, because I'm like, wow, what does that even mean? What I lead with? I know I lead with energy that I believe is, anyway, I'm going off topic, but I just think it's
Okay.
such an interesting thing for everybody to do that is listening to the show.
I also think about, when I first started following you, you were a woman in a different stage of life. We talked on the podcast so much about the perimenopausal and the menopausal transition, but I haven't talked to very many who are professional intuitives. Anybody who has gone from menstruating to the process of not menstruating anymore, no matter how you identify, I know that their intuition and their relationship to spirit can really be radically altered as well. I'm curious what you've noticed as you've grown older, as you've gone through transitions and different stages of your life as a woman. How did that impact your intuition and your spiritual practice?
So I am 65. And I turned 65 this year. I feel 40. I've never had any work done, and I feel like I look great, more empowered than ever. I feel like I have more energy now than I've ever had. I have a great marriage, and I don't give a shit about what people think of me anymore. That's been interesting. I needed people to. I also have codependent rising. Okay, I have a Libra rising. It's like my astrology chart is like, oh my God. It's like, please like me. Or I like, how can I help you? But I had to kind of get over that kind of need for me to be popular. I think that was when I was much younger, when I first got to Hay House. And I had a lot of problems with that because my mother taught me I wasn't safe if people saw who I really was. I inherited that from my ancestry, that it wasn't safe to be fully yourself, and especially not in public. If anybody ever said it, I would take it really personally. And I really just want to be super creative. And I have a life experience that can really benefit other people. I've made a lot of mistakes. And I think it's through our mistake making that I feel that I have my most credibility, to be honest. It's how did I handle the difficulties, and how did they change me? I don't shy away from the shadow at all. I can't stand it when people just go love and light. I'm like, oh, gag me. The shadow is the most important thing to address. And especially when you hit menopause, perimenopause, you're starting to realize, oh my God, my clock is ticking, am I partnered or whatever? Or of course, if that's not the way in which you engage in relationship. But for me, yes, my identity was very wrapped up in my sexuality and when I was younger, before I met my husband, and my value and worth as a woman what did I look like? And I was taught, like, the record business is horrifying. I had to be skinny, and I never really was. And you had to be younger, and I wasn't. And like all of these things, it was just all these mixed messages about my value and also what I could produce. Because, my parents were real hardworking European immigrants, right? And you had to work hard and and be very smart in academia. It was like lots of stuff. So after perimenopause, which really are the best years for a woman, I think when you hit your 40s, you're the juiciest, certainly at a sexual level, you're at your peak. Men peak out at 18, 19, or at least that's what they say, or I may not even be able to say that. I don't know anymore, but that's in my generation, that's what we knew. But I know for most of us who identify as women, that's just nature, right? And
Mhm.
that's our kind of last chance for romance and make a baby.
Yeah.
Right, that's kind of the way the body works. And then after that, it's more about, well, what worth do I have? Like, since that's not the big issue anymore. I married a phenomenal man who just, I can become a little old shriveled prune and he's still going to think I'm gorgeous. It's not about that, but it was really about how could I unravel all of those stories that you know, because I had body dysmorphia, I had eating disorder, like for the longest time.
Mm.
I'm still very aware of it. I haven't binged it since I was in my mid 30s, but like 30 years, but still I had bulimia, I had the whole 9 yards, right? So it
Mm.
was like, how could I liberate myself from all these false expectations and also deal with the fact that I never expressed any anger? That was an interesting segue. It was like, okay, who am I? What do I believe? And then the production thing, I got very much into the hustling of things, and I burnt out. I had a
Mm.
motorcycle accident in my 50s. I learned how to ride a Harley and collected them in my 50s. Like I did some shit in my 50s. I'm like, I am doing it. I'm going to do all the things that scared me. And but then I realized, I was just over amped, trying to prove myself, and I didn't even know I was doing it. So that's another reason why I think, and why you would look at me and go, wow, look at how successful she is, because for the longest time I was a workaholic, right? So that's not something to aspire to.
Was spirit telling you in other ways before the motorcycle, you need
Oh yeah.
to slow down?
Oh yeah. I didn't know how to ask for help.
Mm.
I had a phenomenal coaching academy, and it was so good. The students were incredible, but I didn't have a system to support me correctly. But then the bike accident happened and I had to shut the doors. But I mean, I had it was, the content was incredible. I just didn't know how to ask for help or how to run a business. It was an interesting thing about what happens to all of us as we reach different parts of our lives, like what's important to us.
Mhm.
Now more than ever, I'm about the service.
Mhm.
I'm about the service because I know I have seen it all. Literally. I mean, I've been there, I've seen it. I know also by seeing other people and by seeing how, like, the quote unquote overnight successes don't last.
I really appreciate you sharing, like, pretty vulnerably so far about, like, I've been around a long time. I'm still learning things. I have my own shit that I'm working through and dealing
Mm.
with. I'm particularly struck by what you said about mistakes. Like, is there a mistake that you've made as a spiritual leader that you are still trying to correct or that you regret?
I don't regret any of it. No, I have not got one thing that I regret of a quote unquote mistake. You can't hurt yourself for what you don't know, but once
Right.
you know something, that's a different story. So I don't regret what I didn't know, because I was a person who didn't know what I didn't know. Of course I regret hurting people if I've hurt anybody, like by my own ignorance or whatever. But you asked me a big question of, as a spiritual leader, because I really always see myself as myself too, right?
Right.
But there's today, as I sit here looking at you, there is not one thing that I regret. Not one thing.
So, regret, I totally agree with you. I have very few things because I value the going from not knowing to knowing. Like, I value that so much.
Yeah.
So, I would say, yeah, I have remorse about people that I've hurt and that sort of thing, but I don't regret it because, like you said, I don't blame myself. But what I'm curious really about is, you said, the value that I bring now, particularly as a woman of this age, as a person who's been in business, as a person with a long career, is that I have made mistakes. So what are some of the mistakes that you're like, please let me tell you, I have made this mistake and I want to
Oh,
help you avoid this
yeah,
mistake?
mostly I think comparing myself to other people. That's a mistake. I have done that. That is a mistake I regret. That is. Also on a emotional, psychological level, I was raised to believe everything is my fault. I don't want anybody hurt ever, but sometimes people project onto you,
Mm.
and it's not your fault that they do that. So that wasn't a mistake. I'd say a learning curve for me, not a
Mhm.
mistake, but a real learning curve, is to do my own work and to recognize what is mine and what is not mine. Also, I'm allergic to drama. So, recognizing that just doesn't help, that there's a false counterfeit bonding when there's drama, right? So, I think in the early days, my mistake was that social media was always supposed to be nice. Do you know what I mean? And recognizing that it's not personal. So the mistake that I say that I would tell somebody not to make, like to say, hey, don't do this. If there's something really that you can make amends for and you can change, that's one thing. And that is the one thing that I know I've listened and I've made the changes of certain things. I wish sometimes, and I can't even think of a real thing, that I would sometimes stop and ask myself, is this really mine? Because I think I can make things worse. And
Right.
again, talking about, I don't separate myself. I don't even see myself as a spiritual leader. Like when you said that, I'm like, and I get it. I have a sense of responsibility because a lot of people, I've been around a long time.
Yeah, you have a very, very, very large global audience.
I do.
Yeah, so it's kind of like default.
But I feel, yeah, it is funny that is. I know I just don't see myself that way, and I know it. I probably should.
What are some of the personal archetypes that you might have identified with when you were earlier in your career that maybe you've outgrown? And what are some of the archetypes you're working with right now?
I think the archetype of the victim, like the wounded healer, not, the wounded healer was something that was much more something I identified with in the early part of my career. Now it's much more about the crone. It's much more about the hag. It's much more about the wise woman. And I'm having a lot more, I'm more maybe the fool right now because I'm like jumping into things and loving it. And the goddess that I'm working with right now is Hecate. Hecate is the goddess of liminality, of the between worlds. And she takes that torch and she goes down into the darkness and she brings illumination. But she doesn't come in there with perfection. She doesn't look for perfection. She's not interested in perfection. She is interested in illumination. There's a big difference. And that when you feel lost, that there is the capacity for illumination and a capacity to move through those darker corridors out to the other side. And I think one of the best parts about that goddess is about her strength in the dark, and she's also, the goddess of magic too. There's a lot of things that we can attribute to her, but that in the liminality piece of being outside the lines, of being in the in-between is something, because we are there in society, we're there, but I'm there personally too. And I get my strength from knowing that this is what I'm working with. It's funny. I really honestly don't know how the hell I got here. When I think of, how did you start your journey? I said, well, I never in a million years thought I would end up here. I never, ever had any aspiration to be here. I didn't.
Yeah, you really did want to be a singer and a musician.
Totally did.
Yeah.
And I love doing oracles, and I love, mediumship and readings and stuff. But I've never cared about being famous or like when you say you have a global audience, you're a leader. I'm like, I don't care about that. I care about holding space for other people so that they can find themselves. That's way more interesting to me. Maybe when I was younger, I'd be like, oh, because I was on tour with Sylvia Brown at the very beginning. I'd be like, she was so famous and I was stuck in front of like 7,000 people, and it was like, I was like the deer caught in the headlights. And so I used to wonder, who was I compared to where she was, right? And see that gap. And I did feel that way. So I think the comparison thing, why am I not there? And who am I? And why are they? And what's going on? And how do I make this work?
How did they do it? Yeah.
How did they do it? And then I realized, who cares? Just do what you do. And that was, and the president of Hay House told me that. So in the beginning, I was quite insecure. I think I would say that. So I don't know what archetype that is. The archetype of like, I don't know if I can do this. Oh my God. And then it came now to like, I just wear it. It's I'm the Merlin, I'm the high priestess, I'm the goddess Hecate, who has been, she is who I work through right now.
And she's been through some shit, right? So
absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit more about like what is your spiritual practice? Do you draw your own oracle cards? Do you do trance work?
So my spiritual practice, I am very much all about staying connected to a higher power. And I have relationship to spirit animals, and my dad, who is Serbian, and my great grandmother was Mongolian. So we have a great lineage of, Slavic folklore, as well as a Mongolian history with spirit animals. That's my dad taught me about them when I was a kid. So that's where I learned about that. So, I have a deep relationship with certain of the animals, like dragonflies were a big one for me, ladybugs. We have a lot of wildlife where I live, so I'm very aware of that. And I am an animist. So the other thing is part of my spiritual practice. Like, I don't have any specific goddess altar or whatever. I mean, I have an altar, but it's there more in, just as like a humble thank you kind of thing. But I believe that everything is alive. Everything is alive. And even when you create something, my decks, I feel, have a spirit. My practice is, I come from a 12-step program almost 38 years ago. So I work a 12-step program, and I pray and I meditate, and I do a personal inventory, and I so for me, I journal. I definitely pull a card every single day. But I do a lot of surrender work and a lot of shadow work. So I have a therapist, I have a coach, because I need to keep my channel clear. Oh, I know. Here's something. Because you asked me something before, and I wouldn't call this a mistake, but I do want to go back to this. It's about, I wish I had listened more, because when people talk to you and they see you as somebody that they follow or somebody that they trust or whatever, and if you don't listen to them and you're like, yeah, do you know what I'm saying? That can be really hurtful. So I think I think that I can think of a couple of instances that I might have done that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, for me, if I were to see myself as a greater archetype, if you will, if you're a leader, my job is to make sure my house is clean and I can sleep at night.
So like listening to people in terms of what they're going through or their feedback for you, like both
what they're going through, what their feedback. And what I got good at was not being reactive. Sometimes people just need to spew, and they need it. Sometimes they do it publicly. And I've learned to be quiet and to allow, and to not, there's times my opinion is not needed. I need to do the work. I have to do the work. I cannot put my head in the sand. That's the other thing. Do I feel the need to revisit certain things from the past today? No. I've actually sat with myself and been to therapy, like, do I do this? Is this true? And then I'll be like, well, maybe it's your stuff. And I'm like, okay, it's my stuff. So it's about me, not about the other person. I just want to be a better person every day. Like the best I could be. If I could be a teeny bit better today than I was yesterday, that's what I'm
1% better every day.
You know what I'm saying?
Better every day. You totally get it.
It's something I've just been sitting with in the past few weeks and going, what is mine to own? And realizing that I'm in this process of letting go some of my old stories of, they did this to me. Like, that was the other thing, right? Like, they did it to me. I'm like, look what they did. And like, how did they do this to me? And I'm like, oh my God, Colette, this person was in pain. Let them be in pain. Like, nobody did anything to you.
Right.
Like
that. Sure. No, this is the benefit of the crone archetype, right? Of just like everybody hurts. That's
the thing that I feel now that I've kind of sat with what you asked, because it's like I have to ponder. But you're right. It's like I'm more sensitive now to other people than I was before, but because I'm less defensive now.
What I'm hearing you say is, like, in the past, you were a channel for spirit, you were working for spirit. And so that was kind of like your prime directive. And now over time, you're like, I'm with these people and actually I'm collaborating with spirit, but I really need to be present. I really need to listen and bring that compassion. And I am somebody that they are looking to as a person in power and authority. Am I getting this? Am I tracking that?
Yes. But I think before I didn't believe. So yes and no. Like I've always been channeling spirit. Now I channel more than before. Like now I'm much more clear. Like I'm here in service. I get it. Spirit, use me. Off I go. I'm out there. Use me as thou wilt. Thy will, not mine, be done, because mine kind of screws things up. Thank you. So let me just do what you want, and I'm good. But I think in the past, when I was younger, I still was trying to prove something. right? That was me, my ego, right? That was my ego, and afraid that somebody would take something away from me, or some of those kind of things. And I would say those would have been more the character flaws, if you will, that might have been operating, and just in the way, and also, trying to control how things are supposed to go because you're insecure. And I people would probably never believe I've been insecure, but
I can relate to that. Just trying to
right,
control things and trying to
right,
be good, trying to be
trying to be
excellent.
good. Now I don't want to be good now. I want to be informed. And I want to do what I know is right. I've also learned that there has to be room for redemption for people. We have to remember that even though, like, people make mistakes, you have to let them learn from their mistake and do better. We're all in pain right now. Some people are more in pain than others.
Yeah.
So how do we get connected, and how do we stay connected? So I've learned, you know what? I came from this way once, but I changed. So it's like we have to allow for the change, the evolution, the redemption for everybody.
Yeah. What's the new beginning for you as you step into your crone eldership kind of?
Like, what's new for you? I'm going to do more painting. I'm going to do more of that. I feel just like really excited about the adventure. But I do have projects. Like, I'm working with this incredible woman named Dr. Deborah Egerton. She wrote a book on inclusion, diversity, equity, and anti-racism. And it's called No Justice, No Peace, KNOW, Justice, No Peace, KNOW. But she's an Enneagram specialist, and she and I have become such good friends. And so we are doing an Enneagram Oracle together. So I'm basically, it's something I've wanted to do for 8 years, but she's the real expert. So I'm the Oracle expert. She's the Enneagram expert. So we've joined forces, and she's going to be very, very influential at Hay House next couple of years. She's an incredible person.
That does sound exciting. This is a major evolution in the spiritual publishing genre, which has traditionally been younger white ladies and older white men.
Right.
And
That's
so
different. Oh no, I wouldn't stay at Hay House. Hay House has a great commitment to diversity and inclusion and equity. They have invested, like, it's a big giant ship, so it takes a while to turn the big ship around. But they have an extraordinary roster of diverse talent now. It's not the same. They're very, very, very committed to that. And I probably, I wouldn't be there if they weren't, because I had to actually ask myself if that was important to me. After, I think I probably would have done something different with the goddess deck. That would be a good one to say, because I had accepted that from Hay House to do, and we were not that successful in how we presented that. That was at the very beginning of all the conversations about, how a white spiritual teacher engages with multicultural deities. I really listened on that one. So I probably wouldn't have done that deck. But I'm actually proud of the deck. So I am proud of, because it was the reason why I got so deep into the work, into understanding my part in all of that, and understanding what I didn't know, and understanding also what was not my part, and what it was that I had to change. But that took me on a trajectory, oh my God, like in this incredible re-identification with what was important to me.
Right. And it's like, this is so important, because this is how the large ships, and we could say that about all of the institutions. And the thing about systemic oppression is that it's a system in that you don't have to have any racists in it for it to oppress people, right? And so you working within it, you working within it to say, you know what, if I look back, I wouldn't have done that deck, and I would have turned to somewhere else. And so now looking forward, it's really important to you to let go. Am I the person who should do this? This is a huge cultural shift in the industry.
Yeah, I even, I asked Hay House with what they would allow, because it was only so much, because it was a lot of money, right? To change some of my cards. To realize, like, oh, there's not enough diversity in here. Well, of course, I was seeing through a white lens. So to bring that in legitimately to make it work, etc. And so it became important, and I'm just like, okay, I am gonna actually put my money where my mouth is. And I still stumbled. Like I wanted to actually redo the goddess deck, and then got into even more of a log jam of realizing that I'm not going to, no matter what I do, I'm not going to get this right in terms of the external. And it was a good exercise for me to see what was mine and what was not mine, and where I had to bow out. Like
yeah,
I
exactly.
had
Where
to
you
be
should cede some
respect.
space and just be like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, this
Yeah,
isn't
yeah, yeah.
my
This is,
wheelhouse.
I don't regret the experience at all. But if I were to choose to do something different, I probably would not have, today, if you say, do you want to do something like that? I go, no,
No, I don't want to
no.
tell those other people's stories, but it is so important for you to know that, to do the
Yeah, I
academic
know that
research, to
obvious.
have that
Yeah,
awareness. And now you can track that and be like, am I the person to tell that story? Or am I the person, or is there a way I could collaborate? I mean,
exactly.
this is great. I'm very excited about the Enneagram deck, because also I've, had people tell me about my Enneagram. I don't know what it's even called, like profile,
What
my
are you?
type. I don't
What's
know.
your
I don't
type?
remember. I can
Well,
never remember the numbers. I have the
this is not
wings.
about this is not about types. This is about the
Okay.
energies. So
The
oracles
energies.
to work best, they are situational, right?
Mhm.
So if you were to talk about the Enneagram, there are 9 Enneagram types. And each one of them, I mean, if you look at Enneagram studying, a lot of it's very pathological, right? So you're looking at the pathology, what's wrong, like the wounds, etc., which is fantastic, right? But we're looking at energies, so that recognizing that every single one of us can learn from another energy type. So the oracle is created so that there are 7 situations that are really attributed to each of the energies. Like like for example, I'm a 7, so we can get super overwhelmed. And that's so true. I can be completely like, or we're like super enthusiastic. It's like we are the enthusiast, right? So you might be an investigator, the 5, I don't know, like something. But if it's only about the type, the oracle won't really work, because you're not seeing others in that. So this is about that we are one unified whole, and that we can learn and see ourselves reflected in energies that we typically say that's not my type, that's not my energy, that's not, but yes, it is. Like I would never be a perfectionist. That's a 1, right? But when the card perfection comes up, we look at it, oh, I'm being called to see the perfection in all things. And then in the protection or the alignment message, be like, are you struggling with perfectionism? Well, any one of us can learn that, but that's particularly for a 1. So I can understand a 1 better.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's what they go through. So this is really an invitation for people to dance with the Enneagram.
In your experience, how many decks have you created now?
I think I have 17 now, because
17 decks.
there's a bunch that aren't published yet. Yeah.
Right. In 2 million decks out in the world. What do the creators who are wanting to create Oracle decks, what do they have to know and do to create an effective deck?
Yes. Oh, nobody asked me that. Oh my God, your listeners are going to laugh their heads off while I'm going, oh my God, you asked me another good question. Okay, thank you for asking me that. Don't overthink it. And don't overthink it, and decide in advance, what kind of deck is this? Like people just tend to create, or sometimes people copy things. Don't copy anybody. That's the other thing. Do not copy anybody, because even though that Oracle deck worked for that person, or but they channeled it to them. Don't, because it will fail. It won't work as well. So if you want to do a true divination system, it needs to have a system called a lexicon, and that needs to come in there. If it's an Oracle card deck where you just pick one card, it can be arbitrary. It's totally fine. You kind of need to know in advance, but the best thing to do to have a really good deck is to ask the deck what it is. Like, who are you? Like, that's what I do with every deck. Like the goddess deck was the only one that I was asked to do, that I wasn't interested in doing. And I was like, okay, well, why am I called to this? And blah, blah, blah. And of course I was called to it for a very good reason, which I was so happy about later. Not happy at the time at all, I will say, but now I look back going, that was, so maybe that was a very good lesson. But now it's like, do your deck, ask who is it, and fall in love with it. And it doesn't matter how many people get it or whatever. I mean, it just do it because you love it. And when you look at it, you're proud of it and it speaks to you, and just put your blinders on and do it and test it. I test all my decks. I test my deck.
So the last question on the podcast is always the same. How do you cope with grief and rage? What do you turn to in that time? And I'm kind of circling back to the beginning. You just kind of slipped in there that you were raised to not express your anger. So how's it different now? How do you cope with grief and rage?
Love this question. So I had an amazing coach who's now very close to me, and I love her to pieces. Her name is Ruth King. She wrote a book called Mindful of Race, and she also wrote a book called Healing Rage. And I really, really heard her when she said, "You're not going to get this perfect." And I was afraid that if I were, because I'm talking about rage from when I was a kid. I'm talking about having been, not my family. My family was great, molested by the neighbor, things like that. Like I've stuffed it in, to be able to express that. So exercise, and admitting it in the moment without expressing it to outwardly to somebody, because sometimes that explosion isn't helpful to anybody, right? So it's like really owning it. For me, grief still sits beside me. Grief is a longtime companion. And same with rage. I'm not afraid of rage anymore, but I also know that there is a healthy way to express rage, or anger, because rage can sometimes be distorted anger, right? So when I say rage, it's really more anger for me. It's not, rage is something that, comes out of something really horrible, and then you have to work with that energy. So I use it as energy, and I don't deny it, but I've been taught to deny it. I've been taught to pull up your bootstraps. My mom was, raised in Germany during the Second World War. Her father was a French Jew who got killed in a Nazi concentration camp. She was raised in a Christian family, hidden from the Nazis. So it's like you come with a whole lot of baggage there.
That's a lot of intergenerational trauma, not far from you.
Yeah. So it's just really, and it's also really important to respect someone else's grief and rage. I don't go in there to try to fix it, or it's like really respecting where other people are at without needing to even participate in it personally. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there's something to that, where, because I do think too, I'm aware that I was born with automatic advantage, very aware of that. And then having that, oftentimes you center yourself. You're just taught you can center yourself all the time. That's because we're blind to that. I'm not blind to that anymore. So I'm also recognizing that, just shut up. And one thing I am responsible for is, which has changed over the years, is to make sure that, my spaces, like our community, we are a trauma-informed space. Like we know what, we don't do trauma vomit in there. We don't, and it's sometimes when people come in, the posting guidelines that we have seem a little strict, but it's for the benefit and well-being of everybody in there. Whereas before it was like a free-for-all. And, it's like, now that I know, and I take, that this environment needs to be as safe as it can, needs to be as for everybody, and we've done a good job in the beginning. Maybe not so much. I wonder that I wish had been different.
Right.
That I didn't know what I know now.
Totally. Well, thank you for sharing so much of what you know now. I'm excited for this next phase in your career and the collaborations that are on the horizon. The music.
New music too. New music. I have some new stuff on Spotify.
I love it. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Colette. This has been a real thrill for me. It's been an honor. Thank you for coming on the show.
Aw, thank you for saying that.
They say never to meet your idols because you're just setting yourself up for disappointment, but that was not at all the case for me in this situation. I was surprised and delighted, and what a thrill. Another reason we love getting older, right? Because you get to live long enough to see some things changing in the culture for the better sometimes. I love that. I hope and pray I have as long a career as Colette, and what an honor to count her as a new friend and mentor, but more importantly, as an ally in solidarity as we seek to do better at interrupting white supremacy culture as white people in spiritual spaces. And as I said, well, she gave some excellent resources in this podcast. They're going to be linked in the show notes. And you can hear more from Colette on her show, Inside the Wooniverse, which I will also link to in the show notes at numinouspodcast.com. And of course, you can also find the notes in your podcast player app. Inside the Wooniverse, by the way, has a dazzling number of 5-star reviews. So I think you should probably check it out. Hundreds of great reviews. If you've taken a moment to rate the Numinous podcast, I really want to thank you. Even if it's just 5 stars and a few words, like this adorable little review from Potato Bug, who wrote, "Thoughtful interviews and great guests. Thank you." No, thank you, Potato Bug. I love reading that. I super appreciate it. And also in the show notes, you will find a link to review the Numinous podcast. Finally, join us once again on Saturday, October 28th, 2023 for our annual Witches New Year event online. We're looking at the astrology of the year for 2024, plus the tarot card of the year, ancestral veneration, and more. Tickets are just $50 Canadian for all 7 sessions with a sliding scale price, of course, as always. Plus, you get an instant download of an expanded chapter from my book, The Spirited Kitchen, Recipes and Rituals for the Wheel of the Year. It has over 300 entries for the magical correspondences of ingredients for your kitchen witchery, plus entries for deities and animals you might invoke in your spellcraft. That bonus is available instantly with your ticket purchase. Get your tickets now at carmenspagnola.com. CarmenSpagnola. Until next time, take care.